is fantasy football picks and bets presented by Prize Picks on the Mayo Media Network. 2021 DraftKings Week 3 early research to the week. Where are our initial thoughts going? Well, not my initial thoughts, but I do want to hear your initial thoughts in the comment section. Drop in what the best stack is going to be for the main slate this week on DraftKings. Remember to smash the like button and subscribe to Mayo Media Network as well. And if you want to get in on some action, and maybe that you play in one of these states where they don't necessarily have full-time sports betting, get it on prizepicks.com. Go to prizepicks.com, use code MMN at sign up, and you'll get a deposit match of up to $100. Or just use our link down in the description. Super easy to do, hilariously fun, and very beatable. But without further ado, here is Pete Overzet for your Week 3 DraftKings breakdown.
All right, guys, welcome back to another edition of First Look at the DFS Salaries. I'm Peter Overzet here on the Mayo Media Network. And like we do every Monday, I sit here and I go through the newly released salaries for the forthcoming week. I have all of the Week 3 DraftKings salaries hot off the presses here. We're going to go through them, see if we can spot anything that gives us some nice lineup building ideas earlier in the week. As usual, the caveat for all of this, lots of news changes, lots of dynamics, can, dare I say, flip the slate on its head, but this is kind of how we get our bearings. Let's think of this as the foundation for the rest of the research we're going to do throughout the week. I think this is going to be another fun slate similar to last week where we have a lot of potential shootout games. We have 4 games I'm seeing with 50+ point totals as projected by Vegas. That would be Seattle, Minnesota, Los Angeles, KC, Arizona, Jacksonville, and Tampa Bay, Los Angeles Rams. So let's get in it. Let's start right here at the top with quarterback. Man, quarterback is absolutely loaded. There's all kinds of directions you can go here. I mean, at the top, Kyler Murray is just pacing for an insane season. It seems like he's going to have the year that Lamar Jackson had a couple years ago where he just went absolutely nuclear. He had 400 yards passing last week, 3 touchdowns, and he even chipped in a rushing touchdown on the ground, which is really what kind of puts his fantasy value into another stratosphere. But as you can tell, he's starting to get pretty expensive here at 8,300. So it's going to be tough to fit him in. His ancillary pass catchers as well, like Rondale Moore, previously sub 4,000. He's up to 5,000 plus this week. So it's going to be harder to make those double stacks work, but this might just be one of those years where Kyler Murray is in the perfect spot. And of course, Jacksonville has been absolutely awful. The Houston Texans torched them week 1. Teddy Bridgewater was lighting them up this week. So you got to love the spot for Kyler Murray. Interesting spot here for Patrick Mahomes after struggling a little bit on Monday Night Football there, or sorry, Sunday Night Football. They are home versus the Chargers in what projects to be a very high scoring game. It is going to be tough to fit in the premium double stack with, Tyreek Hill at 8,400 and Travis Kelce at 8,200. You're probably going to have to pick one of those guys if you want to stack up Mahomes, but impossible to say that Mahomes won't be a good play this week at home versus the Chargers in a high scoring game. We also have Lamar Jackson coming off of a real nice game against Detroit, who we are about to watch them play tonight. I'm recording this on Monday afternoon. We'll see how Detroit looks against the Packers. But man, in week 1, the 49ers put up a ton of points. Lamar Jackson really kind of showing a bit more range as a passer, connecting with Marquise Brown on Sunday Night Football for some big plays. He, of course, doesn't need any convincing when it comes to his ceiling. Russell Wilson has been incredibly efficient as a passer. For years, we have said, let Russ cook. And now it actually looks like he's cooking. 343 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. His salary looks pretty nice here as well. And that's another one of those games with a 50+ point over under. We just saw the Vikings allow a shootout with the Cardinals last week. Now they go and they host Seattle here. So that could be a fun one. Josh Allen's been burning people a little bit. We haven't seen him kind of hit his ceiling through 2 weeks, only 18 points week 1, 17.6 points week 2, but we know the big games are coming. They're still passing a ton. He had 51 pass attempts week 1. This was a game against the Dolphins where they won handily and they didn't need to throw as much. Also, Devin Singletary had a long rushing touchdown, which obviously took the passing offense off the field. So I'm not worrying about Josh Allen, and I'm going to guess he's going to end up looking like one of the better contrarian quarterback plays when you factor in ceiling and ownership. We also have Herbert in that game with Mahomes. We don't love Herbert quite as much on the road in Kansas City. That's a little tougher spot, but man, we just know that a ton of points could be scored here. I also think we have this game in the middle, Tom Brady and Matt Stafford squaring off against each other, both priced here at 6,800 and 6,400. I think both those guys are going to be popular and viable in a game that should see a ton of points. As we try to get down here into where we could potentially save some money, I do think Kirk Cousins is interesting. He's priced up a little bit, but probably deservedly so. He's been chucking it a good amount, 49 attempts in week 1, only 32 yesterday, but very efficient there with the 3 touchdown passes. And this team is willing to be pass heavy in the right scenarios. Against the Cardinals, very up-tempo offense there, and I think they'll have no choice but to go up-tempo in this game versus the Seahawks. So I love Kirk Cousins there. If we're scrolling down a little bit, Teddy Bridgewater is vaguely interesting to me against the Jets, who kind of continue to struggle. I think Trevor Lawrence as well, in the same way that Kirk Cousins was an awesome play this past week against the Cardinals. If we project the Jags to be down, which feels like a pretty safe assumption, then playing catch up in garbage time mode against the Cardinals could yield some decent fantasy points there. So you also have a couple nice stack options, and with Laviska Shenault and James O'Shaughnessy banged up, they could have a very extremely concentrated target tree between Marvin Jones and DJ Chark really being the top guys there. So Lawrence looks interesting to me. We do have to circle Justin Fields. We're waiting on full information on Andy Dalton's health, but he did come in relief for Andy Dalton, who got injured last Sunday. He didn't look particularly great. He threw an interception, but to me, the most encouraging thing was these 10 rushes for 31 yards. I mean, he can easily do the Jalen Hurts type thing right out of the gate, where he gives you an extremely high floor with his rushing ability. And then also, if he finds, himself, getting settled into the offense and kind of calms down a bit, I think this could just be an absolute blast off spot for Justin Fields once he gets going. So we'll have to keep an eye on the injury reports there, but I have a feeling if Dalton's out, Fields will still be fairly popular at 5,200 because he just gives you such a high floor. Not a ton else I'm seeing in this range down here. One other guy I wanted to mention was Derek Carr. Derek Carr is now coming off of 2 great games. He threw 56 times in the opener against the Ravens, and then he threw 37 times against Pittsburgh for 382 yards. And this was on a short week in Pittsburgh, which is a tough spot for quarterbacks. So I've been impressed with Derek Carr, and now you get them in a nice spot here home versus Miami. So I think Derek Carr is definitely viable, and there's plenty of stacking options with Derek Carr as well. That's kind of our snapshot here of the quarterback position. Let's head over to running back, which, unlike quarterback, seems to be getting thinner and thinner by the week. We're having to deal with lots of injuries, lots of guys, losing their roles, no longer being bell cow back. So we'll walk through it here. Derrick Henry was the story of week 2. He went absolutely nuclear, rushed the ball 182 times, 3 touchdowns. But to me, the real interesting thing with Derrick Henry right here, as you see my mouse, he had 6 receptions, and this is not typical for Derrick Henry's career. We've always begged for the Titans to involve Derrick Henry in the screen game more, get him open in space, let him get ahead of steam heading downfield. Well, we finally saw that this past week, and the sky is really the limit here for Derrick Henry if he's regularly catching passes. This is going to be an interesting one for DFS from an ownership perspective, because historically we have seen the field be perfectly content to go right back to Derrick Henry after a smash week. Generally, the GPP bros would fade that because we knew he wasn't going to catch passes, and there was always a risk for his production to bottom out. However, this is a new wrinkle. If he's catching passes, then you start to raise his floor. Is he going to catch as many passes as a Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara? No, but even just adding a baseline of 4 to 5 catches would make him a much, much safer option at 8,600. And I'm just going to guess right now that he's going to be very, very popular this week. Dalvin Cook got a little injured in that game with an ankle sprain. He did come back in. He should be fine unless we hear anything else. Dalvin Cook, I think, should be a pretty nice option in this game if we expect a lot of points to be scored. And I'm guessing just with how many touchdowns the pass game is having here, we've seen Osborne, we've seen Jefferson, Thielen all score. I wonder if Dalvin Cook goes overlooked a little bit. I would say on the high end, this tier kind of ends with Alvin Kamara and Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb continues to run well, but he kind of has the Derrick Henry thing from previous years where he's just not getting enough in the receiving game to make him a slam dunk play. He only had 11 attempts last week. So Nick Chubb is one of those guys. If he's popular, I'm off him. If not, if the field isn't playing him, then he becomes a good GPP play. Alvin Kamara is an interesting one. He's had a really slow start to the season. I mean, they got absolutely tattooed here by the Panthers, only scored 7 points. He had 8 rush attempts, only 4 receptions for 25 yards. So slow going for Alvin Kamara now. I think things are going to get better for him, although on the road at New England isn't the best spot. That said, he could rack up a ton of catches here. Will be interesting to see what the field does. I think 8,200 is a fairly fair price tag. It was nice to see Austin Eckler get more involved in the pass game this week. He went from 0 targets to 9 targets, and now he's going to be in one of the better games of the week versus the Chiefs on the road. I have to imagine Eckler is going to be fairly popular, and rightfully so, at 7,200. Jonathan Taylor's price tag just keeps plummeting. I think he was 8,000 week 1, 7,200 last week, now all the way down to 6,700. I get it. Marlon Mack is working in. Nyheim Hines is on passing downs. Now they're on the road at Tennessee. But again, similar to Nick Chubb, similar to pre-2021 Derrick Henry, they have extreme upside because we know these guys are elite rushers, elite talents. And when the field's not on them, I think they become very good GPP plays. Najee Harris is probably too cheap. His price didn't come up a ton after being a staple of cash games last week. He didn't even smash, but it just shows you when a running back like him is playing all the snaps and he's getting the pass work, he has a really safe floor. So Najee Harris there, I think, is going to be a solid play. And Saquon Barkley here as well. 6,500. The rumor, heading into the season was the team was going to be managing his snaps. That does appear to be the case, but then you see him break off a long run on, was it Monday Night Football last week? Thursday Night Football, sorry. And he looked spry. He looked good. It seemed like things could trend in the right direction for him. So he's another kind of boom bust GPP play. I can't imagine trusting him in cash, but at 6,500 at home versus the Falcons, who continue to give up just a ton of points to everyone they play, he looks interesting to me. In this range down here, you can see by the questionable tags that we have some injury situations that we need to keep tabs on. Josh Jacobs, of course, didn't play this past week. Darrell Henderson left the game with an injury. DeAndre Swift is heading into tonight as questionable. I could see DeAndre Swift having another good game and becoming chalk at this price tag here at 5,800, coming off of an 11 target game. If he does anything similar to that again tonight, I think he's going to be extremely popular, and rightfully so. As we get down here, I've been encouraged by what I've seen with Chase Edmonds in that offense. Another week where he had 5 targets, 5 receptions, and he's close to breaking off some big plays. So I think Chase Edmonds remains a good way to get cheap access to that Cardinals offense. There was one player in here as I was scrolling through salaries that absolutely shocked me. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is down here at 4,800. I legitimately thought that it was a mistake. I mean, he's right here next to Jeremy McNichols. Like, what happened here? And the thing that's crazy to me is, look, I get it. I get that Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been massively frustrating from a fantasy perspective, but the usage has actually been good. John Daigle from NBC Sports Edge had a tweet up, and he said, these are the running backs to register at least 80% of their backfield touches through 2 games. It's Najee, it's Joe Mixon, it's CMC, it's Dalvin Cook, it's Derrick Henry, it's Chris Carson, and it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So the usage is still good. And now you're going to get CEH at 4,800 in a projected shootout against the Chargers at home. I mean, this price tag is just too cheap. He should be in the 5,700 range at all, at the very least. But you're getting essentially a bell cow back in the league's best offense, in the highest over-under game of the slate at 4,800. This pricing is whack. I assume he'll be a cash game staple. I assume he'll be very popular. If not, then I will have a lot of him because this price tag is pretty absurd. There's not a lot down here elsewhere. I do think Devin Singletary is interesting. He's been playing well ahead of Zach Moss. This is kind of what you get from, Devin Singletary, but at this price tag, if you're getting 13 attempts and you're getting 3 to 4 targets, I think that's a pretty good spot for Devin Singletary, who seems to be taking the lead from Zach Moss, who was a week 1 scratch. I don't see a ton else in here. The team is getting excited about Michael Carter, the Jets. They seem to be phasing out Tevin Coleman. That's kind of interesting. You see here 11 attempts, 59 yards, 2 receptions. So keep an eye on Michael Carter. We always want to be ahead of these new trends. Michael Carter could be someone who's growing into a bigger role. That said, at Denver isn't the best spot. I guess we have to wrap up by talking about Cordero Patterson, who split time down the middle with Mike Davis, and he's in a 50-50 split with Mike Davis. The problem is this offense is really bad. They're not involving the pass game enough. He did have 6 targets here, but it seems almost begrudgingly with Arthur Smith. He still wants to run these guys up the gut with the I formation. I guess you can mess around with Patterson there if you'd like. Not necessarily my cup of tea, but he is certainly interesting. Let's head over to wide receiver, which again, similar to quarterback, we have a ton of options. I think Tyreek Hill right here at the top is probably going to become one of the best contrarian tournament plays. I'm guessing with his price tag and after he burned people on Sunday Night Football with only 4 targets, 3 catches for 14 yards, that people might feel a little gun shy going back to Tyreek Hill. I'm going to guess this range here is really the popular range. DeAndre Hopkins continues to crush back-to-back weeks with touchdowns. Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. I mean, Lockett has been going absolutely nuclear. Back-to-back 100-yard games, 3 touchdowns through 2 weeks. DK Metcalf, even when he doesn't blow up, the field still seems to know he's a great play and always goes back to him. Jefferson had a bounce-back game after week 1. He's going to be popular as a bring-back in those stacks. I think Diggs here, similar to Hill, could end up being a popular contrarian, or sorry, I should say an underlooked contrarian play. He only had 4 receptions for 60 yards. He did find the touchdown, but people are starting to get impatient. Where are my ceiling games from Stefon Diggs? I think those are going to be coming, and you want to be on him when that happens. We also in the mid-range here, of course, have some guys that I would qualify kind of as the sweet spot as far as guys I want to target here. We have Cooper Kupp, who back-to-back weeks has had a 38% target share for the Rams. That's just in a massive, absurd target share. You see it filling up the box score, 10 targets, 11 targets. He had 2 touchdowns, finished with 39.8 fantasy points. I'm surprised his price didn't come up more here. It's still 6,800. I think he's going to be very popular for a second week in a row, and he's an awesome play. I think Keenan Allen is a great play in this range at 6,600. He had 8 targets again in going against the Chiefs in a high-scoring game. Should be very nice. It's funny to see these Tennessee Titans wide receivers paired up. A.J. Brown, just something seems off with him. He only had 3 receptions on 9 targets, just not all the way there, but we know he's talented enough to turn it on at any second. Let's see here. One other guy I would mention in this range, of course, you have the Bucs wide receivers. I just like that game. So I always like to see where the ownership settles, but Mike Evans, 6,300, Godwin, 6,100. You can scroll down a little bit more for Antonio Brown, who's going to be the cheapest of the 3 at 5,200. Those guys all look like solid plays to me. Marquise Brown, I feel like he's shedding the boom bust label before our eye. Had 6 targets week 1, 10 targets last night. He's had back-to-back games with touchdowns. And until the rookie Rashad Bateman is back in this offense and maybe stealing some targets away from Brown, I think he's a great play every week. We're starting to see some of these rookie price tags come up a bit. Jamar Chase up to 5,400. We have my guy Rondale Moore up to 5,000. The cat's out of the bag that these guys were awesome wide receiver prospects, and they're delivering early. I think DJ Chark looks like a value here at 5,300, especially if Laviska Shenault misses some time. Corey Davis down here, he had a huge week 1, but then was relatively quiet in week 2. He might be a nice bounce back spot again. We'll have to see if Jamison Crowder is active or not. I think this price tag for Tyler Boyd is just too cheap coming off of a 9-target game, 73 yards. He does have that slot profile role, but I think that should be a pretty nice role against Pittsburgh there. Tyler Boyd too cheap at 4,700. We mentioned Will Fuller last week. Will Fuller ended up not playing. It does now sound like he is going to play this week. So Will Fuller at 4,700. The problem is it doesn't sound like Tua is going to play. So then you're wondering about how does Fuller perform with Jacoby Brissett. You could probably take it or leave it with Will Fuller. As we scroll down here a little bit more, we can find a couple other values. I think Mecole Hardman is interesting here at 3,900. Mecole Hardman actually led the team in targets last night on Sunday Night Football there. So I think Mecole Hardman is going to be a very nice play and probably the guy you want to toss in to double stacks with Mahomes. If you're choosing one of Kelsey or Hardman, you toss in Hardman at 3,900. I think he's a little underpriced here. My camera has gone blurry. Let me fix. I can't be on Pat Mayo's channel and have a fuzzy camera. I mean, what am I going to do? I'm going to get fired here. Come on. Come on, Peter. There we go. Come back to me. Come back to me. Do we get back? Why is my camera struggling so much right now? We are going to press on. This is more about the salaries than it is my face. I'm tilting. I'm tilting. Is it getting better? A little better. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Hopefully it's getting better. Let's see if there were any of these other cheap wide receivers. Dyami Brown is kind of interesting to me. He might get lost in the shuffle having last played on Thursday night. He had 6 targets. I don't think Curtis Samuel is going to be back again this week, so he looks good. Bryan Edwards down here as well. We mentioned how good Derek Carr has looked. I think Bryan Edwards is someone to keep in consideration here. His role seems to be growing a little bit. He had 5 targets for 81 yards on 4 catches there. I think we have a misprint on this because he had 4 or 5 targets for 81 yards. He's interesting to me. And yeah, not too much down here I'm seeing as the pump plays. KJ Osborne, though, at 3,500 is intriguing. 9 targets week 1, 6 targets in week 2. He's really benefiting from Irv Smith being out. So I think KJ Osborne is someone that will probably end up being fairly popular as the pump play. I'm trying to see if we're down here really dumpster diving, if we can find anything else. I'm not seeing much. You guys want to go back to the Donovan Peoples-Jones? Well, he is now the stone minimum back-to-back weeks of having 1 target. I mean, it is crazy to see what has happened to some of these preseason darlings. Marquez Callaway here, who everyone absolutely loved in the preseason. He's now coming off of 2 dud games, hasn't even eclipsed 3 DraftKings points this week. Let's wrap up here with tight end, and then I will go and try to figure out what's going on with my camera. I am tilting so hard, guys. Normally, I just do this in front of it, and there, I got it. All right, my camera's back. You can see my face for tight ends. Travis Kelce back on the main slate, 8,200. Whew, that is expensive in this economy, but absolutely worth it. Travis Kelce just has to be one of the most consistent fantasy performers. 25.6 points week 1, 26.9 week 2, just gives you such an advantage at the tight end position. Waller came down to earth a little bit last week against the Steelers, only 5 receptions on 7 targets after a 19 target game. We always knew 19 targets wasn't sustainable, but we would like to see him up in the 8 to 10 target range to feel comfortable at this salary. What does Rob Gronkowski have to do to get more expensive? I mean, back-to-back weeks with 2 touchdowns. Rob Gronkowski, 4 touchdowns through 2 weeks. Tom Brady loves him in the red zone. This should be a high-scoring game against the Rams. Gronk, I envision he will be popular this week. I think there's a nice other kind of tier cluster here. Hawkinson, Andrews, Pitts, and Fant. I guess we could toss Logan Thomas into that too. These guys are all interesting, and I think you can play the ownership game. Whatever of these 2 ends up being the lowest owned, those are probably going to be the guys I gravitate to. None of these are incredible game environments. Baltimore, Detroit, Atlanta, New York, Giants, New York Jets, Denver, Washington, Buffalo. But these are kind of the spots in tournaments I think we want to be targeting because we know there's a ceiling there and not all of them will be popular. I think it's interesting that Tyler Higbee's still here only at 4,000. I think he could be up in this tier. He didn't have the production that he had in week 1, but he still was playing almost all the snaps. So just kind of a weird anomaly, I think, with Cooper Kupp dominating so much last week. I think Higbee would be a guy I would be willing to go back to. If we're going dumpster diving, there's definitely some options. I think Austin Hooper without Jarvis Landry, who's going to be missing some time. He now had 3 targets week 1, 5 targets week 2. His role is always pretty solid, and that's a nice price tag there for Austin Hooper at 3,600. I think Gerald Everett is interesting too. He is splitting a little bit of time with Will Dissly. Only had 2 targets, but we want to be making bets on this offense, and he's going to have a nice red zone role. This game against the Vikings projects to be a shootout. So I think if you're playing Russell Wilson, similar to kind of with the Mahomes double stack, you want the cheap guy to toss in. I think Everett's a nice guy to toss in if you can't afford both Lockett and Metcalf. You know, we have some injuries we got to pay attention to. James O'Shaughnessy is going to be out. Chris Manhertz is the fill in there. I mean, how much is Manhertz? Manhertz is 2,700. I guess if you want to punt it off, that's not bad. He had a touchdown week 1, but he is primarily the blocking tight end. So not too much love for Manhertz. Let's see if I can find you guys one other cheap tight end that might be interesting. How about CJ Uzomah? Again, not a ton of targets. He only had 2 in both these weeks, but similar to kind of the Gerald Everett, I think the Bengals should start passing a little bit more in the red zone, and Uzomah will be a part of that against Pittsburgh there, 2,700. But man, it's gross out there. I wish I had more dumpster diving for you. Like I've never heard of Bug Howard. Who is Bug Howard? An incredible name. But that's what happens at tight end. Let's see at defense. I never have any good early defensive takes because the 2 rules are don't pay up and don't play a popular one. So if we're eyeing the defenses down here, I think the Titans at home versus Carson Wentz looks pretty solid to me. We know that Josh Allen can always turn over the ball. Washington football looks decent. Seahawks versus Kirk Cousins. We got some options down here. The Bears are coming off of a big week. And yeah, so there's my defensive preview. Even the Jets against Teddy Bridgewater, I don't think is the worst here. On the high end, Broncos 4,300, probably too expensive. Patriots 4,100, Steelers 39, Bills 38. It is hard to get up to these defenses, but you can see it pay off. The Buccaneers, the Patriots last week. I have a hard time getting up to them, but if you don't spend all your money on wide receivers like me, then you can fit in some of these defenses. So I appreciate you guys sticking around with me as I ramble my way through the first look here on the Pat Mayo Media Network. You guys can sign up for Run the Sims and look at these first look salaries within the context of projections. That's really where we start to dial in who's a good value and who's not. You can use promo code Pete for 10% off any Run the Sim subscription. We have main slate optimizers. We have full simulations for main slates and showdown slates. And my personal favorite right now is this prop finder tool. Looking at, you can type in any line for a prop bet and Run the Sims will show you the expected value of that prop based on median projection and how much juice there is. So loving what's going on over at Run the Sims. Thank you to Pat Mayo for having me. Good luck this week. I will see you guys for week 4.